Welcome back to the Celtics Nation Rise recap. I'm Griffin Aldridge, and your Boston Celtics have defeated the New York Knicks with a final score of 94 to 81 in the Summer League game, the second Summer League for the Boston Celtics. They defeated the Grizzlies. Now they defeated the New York Knicks, and they're starting off 2-0. So hyped. Great game for the Boston Celtics. And there were some flashes by I'm going to say one notable player. That is Charles Bassey. So we'll start off with him really quick. Charles Bassey today had 22 points, went 8 from 12 from the field, shot 66.7% from the field goal, 6 for 6 foul shot attempts, 13 rebounds, 4 offensive, 2 steals, 3 blocks. And this is all from Justin Turpin. So shout out to Charles Bassey. What a guy. And I'm going to start this off. He could potentially, I think he should make the Celtics roster. I just was on Celtics Talk Weekly. Go check that out. That's live right now. And if not, go to the lives and check that out later. But Charles Bassey is a guy who, again, I'm going to say it, in 22 minutes had 22 points, 13 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, 3 blocks, and shot 66.7% from the field goal. He's a guy who just sticks out, and he's NBA ready. He's a guy who, you look at the Boston Celtics center depth, and he is at the top of it already, and this is just Summer League. And he stands out, and that's one guy to keep your eye on. But let's get into it for the day. So I know I did it backwards. I haven't had a feel from it. The recaps, it's been a minute since the recaps, but we'll go over the quarters, we'll get into all of that, and then we'll go over the player stats. But in the first quarter, the Boston Celtics outscored the New York Knicks with a score of 27 to 18. In the second quarter, the Boston Celtics once again outscored the New York Knicks with a score of 15 to 12. And then in the third quarter, the Boston Celtics outscored the Knicks again, 29 to 23. However, in the fourth quarter, the Knicks would outscore the Boston Celtics with a score of 28 to 23. So the Boston Celtics, their highest lead was 21 at 3:07, and there were no lead changes. The Boston Celtics commanded the pace all throughout the game. So big game for the Celtics. The Celtics shot 33 for 77 field goal attempts, and 16 turnovers. And the fouls tonight were just insane. And we'll get into that, as obviously I found this out in the Summer League. There's a 10 foul rule. So 10 fouls and you're out. So Jordan Walsh in particular was loving that rule. But my overall thoughts, this was a great game for the Celtics, and it shows that their young core is going to be very prominent in the upcoming years, and it shows that the main Celtics are going to be fun too. There's a lot of guys who, I said this on Celtics Talk Weekly, go back and watch it, but I said there's a lot of guys that you kind of look at and you're like, all right, well, they kind of be like a Ron Harper Jr., how he was for the Boston Celtics last year. Ron Harper Jr. didn't make the Celtics team, didn't get a two-way contract with the Boston Celtics. However, went to the main Celtics and dominated. And he had amazing, you know, games for the main Celtics, and he stood out. And the Pistons saw that, and they offered him a two-way contract, and that's where he is right now, the Pistons. So there's a lot of guys on the Celtics Summer League team who will eventually be on the main Celtics that just keep an eye on, because they might not be a guy for the Celtics, obviously having all 15 roster spots, but they might be a guy who gets a two-way contract somewhere else, or who knows? Because Charles Bassey, for one, is one guy who deserves one right now for the Celtics, and that's a guy they can't let go, because that's a guy that could have a lot of success in Boston. But let's get into the stats. For the New York Knicks, their leading scorer was McCullough Jr. In 28 minutes, had 30 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, and shot 66.7% from the field goal. I cannot say this name, so sorry in advance. Hulk Porter? No, wait. Hulk Portal. I don't know how to say his name, but we'll we'll go with that. He had Ariel Hulk Porter. I can't say it, but in he had 9 points, 13 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, 3 blocks, and shot 50% from the field goal. Uh, and that was pretty much it. Again, it was McCullough uh, with the leading score for the Knicks. So you kind of look at that. I am butchering those names, so sorry in advance. But let's get into the Celtics stats because I know our guys. For the Boston Celtics, we started off at the bottom. Hayden Gray in 2 minutes had no other stats. Aaron Scott, 5 minutes, 1 steal. That was about it from him. Zach Hicks in 2 minutes, no other stats. And then down below, we have Isaiah Wong, who in 18 minutes had 2 points, 1 assist, 2 steals, and shot 25% from the field goal. He's a guy that can really stick out. And I don't care what people say. I know he hasn't really proved it for the Celtics Summer League. And I will say the defensive scheme against Isaiah Wong was incredible today. He did not get an opportunity to get a bucket at all. 2 points, shot 25%. So rough game for him, but he's a guy who I see him playing for the Maine Celtics, and he's a guy that can really get a lot of time and shine. He's a guy who, I'm going to say again, who is kind of like a Ron Harper Jr., who could start off there, work his way up, and get a two-way contract somewhere. He's a guy who I do see potential with for his career in the NBA someday. Ben Gregg, in 2 minutes, had 1 rebound, no other stats. Amari Williams in 16 minutes had 2 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and that's all he had today. Again, didn't have a crazy performance like he did last game for the Boston Celtics. However, today was kind of a little on the lower side, but again, this is a guy who he is a guy who's going to develop a lot. He's a two-way player for the Boston Celtics, so he's going to get a lot of time in Maine and really show what he is down there. So there's still a lot to prove for him, but we'll see that from Amari. Kenny Lofton Jr. in 18 minutes had 8 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and shot 50% from the field goal. However, he was not very productive out there. He's a guy who we are very hyped to see a lot of him from the beginning. However, today he was not doing that. And this is a guy who, again, I think will play for the Boston Celtics G League team, the Maine Celtics, obviously. And I feel like this is a guy who, again, with Isaiah Wong, who they stick out like sore thumbs. This is a guy who, if he could get prepared, he's the type of guy that could really show what he is and, get his feet wet. He's been playing overseas. He's a guy who could show what he's worth and get a two-way contract. However, today's performance was not cutting it. Last game's performance was not cutting it. So he really needs to prove something, and he will. He will. He just needs to get his feet warmed up. Max Shulga in 22 minutes had 7 points, 2 assists, 2 steals, and shot 33.3% from the field goal. So great from Shulga. Again, 57th pick for the Boston Celtics. I'm very impressed with what he showed today, and I really like that. I didn't do a graphic for him because he's not in my notable players, but I was really impressed with what I saw from Shulga. So got to give him credit. So we got to stand out to that. But we are trying something new with the recap. So let's start it off with Kendall Brown. Kendall Brown in 19 minutes had 11 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 steal, and shot 80% from the field goal. Tonight, he stuck out to me because Kendall Brown is a player I met actually, and he actually played for the Long Island Nets last year, and I got the chance to see him play a couple times in Maine, and I think he's a guy who will come back to Maine, and he is the guy that sticks out completely, like what I said with, again, Kenny Lofton and Isaiah Wong. This is a guy who I could definitely, I don't know if it will be with the Celtics, but it even could be. I mean, if he sticks out enough, this is a guy who could potentially see some run for the Boston Celtics with Kendall Brown. He maybe a two-way contract even, but this is a guy who I could see starting off the season with Maine and really picking up a two-way contract. I was very impressed with Kendall Brown, and I really love the performance that he had today. But next, that's going to bring us into Jordan Walsh, who in 25 minutes had 13 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, and shot 20% from the field goal. The field goal did not look that well, but Walsh had a good game, had 17 points last game. But the funny thing about him is he had 7 fouls today. So that was kind of crazy. Obviously, 10 being the limit, but had 7, so took advantage of that. Not Walsh's best game, where you will see a lot more from him as he's going to be a key role for the Boston Celtics. Obviously, Brad Stevens already mentioned that this is a retool year. He said that during the live broadcast of the Celtics game. And this is a retool year for the Boston Celtics. And you're going to see young guys play a key role. And Jordan Walsh is one of them. However, this guy might be one of them as well in Jalen Bridges, who in 23 minutes had 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 blocks, and shot 60% from the field goal. He was a guy that did not play last game, however, went out and had a bang tonight. And I don't know who it was reported by, but we are going to see a lot from Jalen Bridges. And he's a guy to keep an eye on as the Celtics are interested in him. And he is going to be a guy that you're going to see potentially, if they open up a spot, he could potentially be there as the Celtics show a lot of interest in him. So a strong performance from him. And that's one guy to kind of keep an eye on and be like, all right, we see what you're doing here. But that's going to bring us into our next player, and that being my guy, Baylor Shireman, who in 27 minutes had 13 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals, and shot 40% from the field goal. And he had a great triple today. It was a logo shot, and he was playing his game that he does for the Boston Celtics. And I have to say, when I saw his game tonight, it's what he's going to do for the Boston Celtics. And that's what Brad Stevens said, too. He's a guy who I feel like is more than capable to go out there and shoot 30, but he's showing his role and what he does with the Boston Celtics as well. And that's what he did tonight. And he had a phenomenal game. However, the best player on the court tonight for the Boston Celtics, and again, I said it earlier, is no other than Charles Bassey. In 22 minutes, had 22 points, 13 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, 3 blocks, and shot 66.7% from the field goal. Again, great showing from Bassey, and that's going to be a player to keep your eye on, as I feel like there's a shot he gets a spot with the Celtics. He should, and I think he's the best option for the Celtics. He had a phenomenal game, and it was just easy for him out there, and he was just dominating the competition, and that's a guy that you need. And he could potentially, if the Celtics like him, which I think they do, because this is 2 performances that he had great games in a row. So that's a guy to keep your eye on, because he's a guy that the Celtics could potentially lean towards. But again, great win. The Boston Celtics defeat the New York Knicks with a final score of 94-81. Great game, starting off the season 2-0. So very happy about that. And with that being said, you guys, that's going to do it for this one. Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications to be notified every time we upload. We will be doing recaps all summer long, so make sure to stay tuned for that. And also, we will have a lot of content in these upcoming weeks, whether it be fan series, breaking news, or the weekly podcast. So make sure you are subscribed and have that bell on, because you guys need to be notified every time we're uploading. So thank you guys again. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.